The warning lights flashed red across the control room of mining station Kepler 442. Kim Nari wiped the sweat from her forehead as she crawled out from under the main power console. Her small hands were covered in grease and her work clothes were torn, but she had fixed another critical system failure. "Nari, how bad is it this time?" Park Do-hyun asked from across the room. The older man served as chief engineer of the station, and Nari had worked under him for 3 years. His weathered face showed concern as he watched the display screens. "The quantum stabilizers are failing again," Nari replied, brushing dirt from her knees. "I can keep them running, but we need new parts soon. These systems are 20 years old." The mining station hung in deep space far from any major shipping lanes. It processed rare minerals from nearby asteroids, sending the materials back to Earth colonies. The work was dangerous and the conditions harsh, but the pay was good for those willing to live on the edge of known space. Nari was only 24 years old, but she understood the station's systems better than anyone. While other workers complained about the isolation and poor food, she spent her free time studying technical manuals and learning how everything worked. Her curiosity had saved the station many times when critical systems broke down. "Commander Lee wants to see everyone in the main bay," announced Han Woo-sung over the communication system. His voice carried worry that made everyone stop working. Nari and Do-hyun exchanged glances. Lee Ji-ho rarely called full station meetings unless something important was happening. They made their way through the narrow corridors toward the central hub, where all 847 station workers were gathering. The main bay was the largest space on the station, used for receiving supply ships and processing large equipment. Now it held every person who lived and worked on Kepler 442. Miners, engineers, cooks, medics, and administrators all crowded together, talking in worried whispers. Commander Lee stood on a raised platform, his face grave. Behind him, the large viewing screen showed empty space filled with distant stars. "I have received an emergency communication from Earth Defense Command," he began. "A Velkan Empire fleet has entered this sector." The room fell silent. Everyone knew about the Velkans. They were reptilian aliens who had been conquering human colonies for the past 5 years. Their technology was far superior to human weapons, and they showed no mercy to those who resisted. "How long do we have?" asked Seo Minho, a former Earth Defense Force captain who now worked in station security. "Their lead ships will arrive in 6 hours, Lee replied. "We cannot outrun them, and we have no weapons capable of fighting a Velkan war fleet." Nari felt her stomach sink. She had heard the stories from other colonies. The Velkans would take everything valuable and force the survivors into slave labor. Many humans never survived the brutal conditions of Velkan prison camps. "We have 2 choices, Lee continued. "We can try to run and likely be destroyed, or we can surrender and hope they allow us to live." "There might be a third option," Nari said, stepping forward. Her voice was quiet, but in the silence of the bay everyone heard her. All eyes turned to the small engineer. Many workers barely knew her name, seeing only a young woman who spent most of her time deep in the machinery, but Do-hyun nodded encouragingly, knowing how brilliant she was. "I have been working on something," Nari said, her voice growing stronger. "A new way to extract minerals from asteroids using quantum resonance. It could increase our mining output by 300%. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Such an increase would make Kepler 442 incredibly valuable, far more profitable than most colonial operations. "What are you thinking?" Lee asked. "If we can prove our value to them, maybe they will want to keep us alive and working," Nari explained. "The Velkans are conquerors, but they are also practical. A station producing that much rare mineral would be worth more than a pile of scrap metal." It was a desperate plan, but it was better than certain death. Lee nodded slowly. "How long would you need to prove this technology works?" "I can set up a demonstration in 4 hours," Nari replied. "The equipment is already built. I just need to make final adjustments." The next few hours passed quickly. While most workers prepared for the worst, Nari worked frantically in her laboratory. Her quantum extraction system was still experimental, but early tests had shown amazing results. She had been planning to request official trials, but now it might save all their lives. Do-hyun helped her move the heavy equipment to the main processing center. "Are you sure about this?" he asked as they connected power cables. "No," Nari admitted, "but doing nothing means we all die or become slaves. At least this gives us a chance." The Velkan ships appeared exactly when predicted. First came the scouts, small but deadly vessels that could destroy the mining station with ease. Then came the main fleet, massive warships that blotted out the stars. The largest ship was a dreadnought called Dominion's Fist. It approached slowly, like a predator stalking wounded prey. Smaller ships surrounded the station, cutting off any escape routes. "Attention, human facility," came a voice over the communication system. The translator struggled with the alien language, making the words sound harsh and threatening. "You will surrender immediately. Any resistance will result in complete destruction." Lee activated the station's communication array. "This is Commander Lee Jiho of Mining Station Kepler 442. We surrender and request permission to negotiate terms." There was a long pause. Then the alien voice returned. "Prepare for boarding. Any aggressive action will result in death." A Velkin transport ship attached to the station's docking bay. The airlock opened with a hiss and heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. The sounds grew closer until the bay doors opened. General Thex Valorian entered like a force of nature. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body covered in dark scales that gleamed under the harsh lights. His eyes were cold and yellow, scanning the assembled humans like a butcher examining cattle. Behind him came a squad of Velkin soldiers, each one armed with weapons that could cut through metal. The general's presence filled the room with menace. His species had evolved from apex predators, and every movement showed deadly grace. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rumbling, filled with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "I am General Thex Valorian of the Velkin Empire," he announced. "This facility and everything in it now belongs to us. You will surrender all weapons, technology, and resources. Those capable of work will be relocated. The rest—" He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. Lee stepped forward carefully. "General, we have something that might interest the Empire. Our chief engineer has developed new mining technology that could greatly increase production." Thex looked at Lee with mild curiosity, like a cat watching a mouse try to escape. "Show me." This was the moment Nari had been preparing for. She stepped out from the crowd, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "General Valorian, I am Kim Nari, the engineer who developed this technology. With your permission, I would like to demonstrate how it could benefit the Velkin Empire." The massive alien turned to look at her. For a moment, silence filled the bay. Then Thex began to laugh. It was a harsh, guttural sound that made the humans step back in fear. "This tiny creature thinks she can negotiate with the Velkin Empire?" Thex said, his voice filled with amusement and contempt. "Look at her. Small, weak, insignificant. What could such a pathetic being possibly offer to warriors who have conquered 12 worlds?" His soldiers joined in the laughter, their weapons trained on the humans. Thex looked down at Nari like she was an amusing pet that had tried to speak. "Human vermin," he continued. "Your species exists only because we allow it. You have nothing we cannot take by force. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Your resistance is meaningless." Nari felt her face burn with humiliation, but she forced herself to stand straight. "General, if you would just let me show you what this system can do." "Silence," Thex roared. "I have heard enough foolishness. You will all be processed for slave labor. The strong will work in our mines. The weak will be disposed of." His yellow eyes fixed on Nari with cruel amusement. "You, little engineer, will clean waste systems. Even human refuse has some use for menial tasks." Lee tried to protest, but Velkin soldiers moved forward with restraints. The demonstration would never happen. Thex had made his decision based on appearances alone, dismissing both Nari and her technology without a second thought. As the soldiers began herding the humans toward transport ships, Nari caught Lee's eye. The commander gave her the slightest nod. He had seen her signal during the confrontation. While Thex had been laughing at her, she had activated a hidden device in her pocket. Her backup plan was already beginning. The general had made a fatal error. He had judged her by her size and dismissed her as insignificant. But Nari was an engineer, and engineers always had backup plans. Soon Thex Valorian would learn what happened when someone underestimated human ingenuity. The transport ship was cold and dark. 800 humans from the mining station were packed into metal cages like animals being taken to market. The air smelled of fear and desperation as people whispered prayers and held their loved ones close. Nari sat in a corner of her cage, her mind racing despite the terrible situation. Around her, other prisoners wept or stared at nothing, but she was studying everything. The metal bars, the lock mechanisms, the way air flowed through vents in the ceiling. Every detail might be important later. Stay strong, whispered Cho Yuna from the cage next to hers. The xenobiologist was in her 30s with kind eyes behind broken glasses. We are still alive. That means we still have hope. Nari nodded but said nothing. She was listening to the ship's engines, learning their rhythm. The vibrations told her about the power systems and structural design. Even as a prisoner, she could not stop being an engineer. The journey to the Velkin command ship took 6 hours. When they arrived, soldiers with electric prods forced the humans out of their cages. They were herded through massive corridors filled with strange alien technology. The walls pulsed with energy conduits and the air hummed with power. The Dominion's fist was enormous. It could hold 50 mining stations inside its hull. Nari tried to memorize the layout as they walked, but the ship seemed to go on forever. Thousands of Velkin soldiers and crew members moved through the passages, all focused on their duties. They were brought to a large cargo bay where General Thex waited. The massive alien stood on a platform, looking down at the human prisoners with obvious disgust. His yellow eyes swept over them like a farmer examining livestock. "Listen carefully, humans," Thex announced in his deep, rumbling voice. "You now belong to the Velkin Empire. Your old lives are finished. You will work until you die, and your deaths will serve our glory." He gestured to his officers. "Sort them by value. Strong males to the mining crews, females for food preparation and cleaning. The old and weak can be disposed of." Nari watched as families were torn apart. Children cried for parents as they were dragged in different directions. Strong men like Do-hyun and Lee were chained together and marked for the hardest labor. The cruelty was casual and efficient. When the soldiers reached Nari, they barely glanced at her. She was small and young, clearly not suitable for heavy work. One alien pointed at her with contempt. "This one goes to waste processing," he said in broken human language. "Even tiny human can clean garbage." Thex looked over and laughed again. "Yes, perfect. The little engineer who thought she could bargain with warriors. Now she can spend her life cleaning our refuse. Perhaps that will teach her about knowing her place." The other prisoners destined for waste processing were mostly older people, or those too weak for harder jobs. They were led through different corridors, away from the main prison areas. Nari realized this might actually be helpful. Waste systems touched every part of the ship. She would have access to places other prisoners could never reach. Their new quarters were in the lowest levels of the ship, near the recycling centers. The rooms were tiny metal boxes with thin sleeping mats and a small water dispenser. The air was thick with the smell of processing chemicals and organic waste. "How can they treat people like this?" whispered Im Soo-young, an elderly woman who had worked in station maintenance. Her hands shook as she looked around the horrible conditions. "Because they do not see us as people," replied Han Woo-sung quietly. The communications expert had also been assigned to waste processing, probably because of his thin build. "To them we are just tools that can think." Nari listened to their conversation while studying the room's construction. The walls were thin metal plates bolted together. Behind them she could hear the hum of power conduits and data cables. The ship's nervous system ran right past their prison. The next morning their work began. Velkin guards led them to the waste processing centers where huge machines broke down organic matter and sorted recyclable materials. The noise was deafening and the smell was overwhelming, but Nari forced herself to pay attention to how everything worked. The Velkin technology was advanced, but not perfect. The machines were powerful but also complex, with many systems that needed constant maintenance. More importantly, they were connected to the ship's main computer network. Data flowed through optical cables that ran along the processing tubes. "You, small human," barked a Velkin supervisor. "Clean the intake filters. Do not touch anything else or you will be punished." Nari nodded obediently and began her assigned task. But while she worked, she memorized everything. The power flow patterns, the network connections, the emergency shutdown procedures. Her engineering training helped her understand systems the Velkins thought were too complex for human minds. During their brief rest periods, she began talking quietly with other prisoners. She learned that Seo Minho was working in the ship's lower maintenance areas. Jung In-ho was assigned to equipment repair in the engineering sections. Han Woo-sung was cleaning communication arrays on the upper decks. Each person had access to different parts of the ship. Together they could map the entire vessel. "Why are you asking these questions?" Cho Yuna wondered during one meal break. The food was a gray paste that tasted like metal, but it kept them alive. I am trying to understand this place, Nari replied carefully. Knowledge is the only weapon they cannot take from us. Over the following days, Nari learned more about Velkan society from observing her captors. They were proud and militaristic, believing that strength was the only measure of worth. They had conquered many worlds through superior technology and ruthless tactics, but pride was also their weakness. They were so confident in their superiority that they never considered humans might be planning anything. The guards barely watched the waste processing workers, assuming they were broken and defeated. This gave Nari opportunities to explore. During maintenance tasks, she discovered access tunnels that connected to the ship's main systems. The Velkans were too large to use these passages, so they were unguarded. She began mapping hidden routes through the ship's infrastructure. She also noticed something interesting about Velkan technology. Their quantum power cores used a specific resonance frequency to maintain stability. The frequency was carefully controlled by computer systems, but Nari realized it might also be vulnerable to interference. Her physics training helped her understand what would happen if someone could disrupt those frequencies. The power cores would become unstable, possibly failing completely, but creating such interference would require access to the ship's main communication array. Meanwhile, disturbing news reached the prisoners through overheard conversations between guards. The Velkan Empire was preparing a major offensive against human colonies. They planned to use the conquest of Kepler 442 as an example to discourage resistance. They are going to execute some of us publicly, Han Wusong reported during one secret meeting. The broadcast will be sent to all human worlds as a warning. The executions were scheduled for the following week. Thex wanted to personally kill several prisoners to demonstrate Velkan power. He had already chosen his victims, including Park Do-hyun and Lee Ji-ho. Nari felt anger burning in her chest. These aliens treated human life like it meant nothing. They laughed at human intelligence and dismissed human potential. But their arrogance was creating opportunities. She began sharing her discoveries with the other prisoners, building a network of information and support. Minho organized the strongest workers, preparing for possible action. Cho Yuna studied Velkan biology, looking for weaknesses in their alien physiology. What are you planning? Young Inho asked during one of their careful conversations. I am not sure yet, Nari admitted, but I know these systems better than they think. There might be a way to turn their own technology against them. The idea was forming slowly in her mind. The Velkans had superior weapons and numbers, but they relied completely on their advanced technology. If someone could disrupt their systems at the right moment, their advantage might disappear, but the plan would be extremely dangerous. Any mistake would mean death for all the prisoners, and it would require precise timing and coordination between people scattered throughout the massive ship. As the days passed, Thex became increasingly confident. He walked through the prison areas, mocking the human prisoners and boasting about Velkan superiority. He seemed to particularly enjoy taunting Nari when he saw her. How is the little engineer enjoying her new career? He would ask with cruel amusement. Perhaps you have learned that humans are only good for cleaning up after their betters. Nari would bow her head submissively, playing the role of a broken prisoner. But inside she was cataloging every detail of his visits, every piece of information about ship operations that the guards let slip. The Velkans saw her as harmless, a small, weak human female assigned to the most menial tasks. They never imagined she was studying their weaknesses and planning their downfall. That was exactly what Nari wanted them to think. The executions were now only 3 days away. Time was running out for her to finalize her desperate plan. But as she worked in the waste processing center, carefully mapping power conduits and network connections, she began to see a possibility. It would require incredible timing and tremendous luck. Many things could go wrong. But it was better than watching her friends die while doing nothing. The small human engineer that General Thex had dismissed as insignificant was about to show him the true meaning of underestimation. Deep in the belly of the Dominion's fist, Nari crawled through a maintenance tunnel barely wide enough for her small frame. The metal was cold against her skin, and the air was thick with chemical smells from the waste processing systems. But she had found something that could change everything. It was her 5th day working in the ship's lowest levels. The Velkan guards had stopped paying attention to the waste processing workers, treating them like invisible servants. This gave Nari the freedom to explore areas that larger beings could never reach. The tunnel led to a junction where multiple power conduits came together. Here she could hear the deep humming of the ship's quantum power cores. The sound was rhythmic, like a massive heartbeat that kept the entire vessel alive. But to Nari's trained ears, something was wrong with the rhythm. She pulled out a small diagnostic tool she had built from scrap materials found in the waste systems. The device was crude but functional, able to measure energy frequencies and power fluctuations. What it showed her made her heart race with excitement. The Velkin quantum cores were unstable. They maintained power through carefully controlled harmonic frequencies, but the balance was delicate. Any disruption to those frequencies could cause catastrophic failure throughout the entire ship. More importantly, she discovered that the same frequencies that stabilized the power cores would be extremely painful to Velkin hearing organs. Their sensitive ears had evolved to detect the slightest sounds while hunting, but this made them vulnerable to specific sonic attacks. Nari carefully made her way back to the waste processing center, her mind spinning with possibilities. She had found a weakness in the seemingly invincible Velkin technology, but exploiting it would require careful planning and precise execution. During the next meal break, she managed to whisper her discovery to Cho Yuna. The xenobiologist's eyes widened as she understood the implications. "Are you certain about their hearing sensitivity?" Cho Yuna asked quietly. "I have observed them closely," Nari replied. "They react strongly to high-pitched sounds from the machinery. Their ear structure is different from humans. What might be uncomfortable for us could be disabling for them." That evening, Nari found a way to contact Jung In-ho through the ship's internal maintenance communications. The former mining equipment operator had been working in the engineering sections, giving him access to detailed ship layouts. "I need to know about the main communication array," she told him during a brief conversation disguised as work instructions. "Where is it located and how is it protected?" Jung In-ho had indeed been mapping the ship during his assignments. "The primary communication center is on Deck 7, heavily guarded. But there are secondary arrays throughout the ship. The closest one to you is 3 levels up near the environmental systems." This information was crucial. If Nari could reach a communication array, she might be able to broadcast the harmful frequency throughout the entire ship. But getting there would require help from other prisoners, and timing would be critical. Over the next 2 days, she quietly shared her plan with trusted prisoners. Ezio Minho, despite being assigned to maintenance work, still thought like a military officer. He began organizing the stronger prisoners into small groups, preparing for coordinated action. "This is incredibly dangerous," he warned Nari during one of their secret meetings. "If we fail, they will kill all of us. If we do nothing, they will kill some of us anyway," Nari replied. "And then they will use our deaths to terrorize other human colonies. We have to try." Han Wusung had been cleaning communication equipment on the upper decks. He confirmed that Velkin systems used biometric locks that required alien DNA patterns to access. But he had also noticed something interesting about their security protocols. They use their own medical database to verify identity, he explained. If someone could access that database, they might be able to create false biometric signatures. Cho Yuna smiled grimly. "I have been studying Velkin blood samples from the medical waste. Their DNA structure is complex but not impossible to replicate with the right equipment. The pieces of the plan were coming together, but they faced a major problem. The public executions were scheduled for the next day. Thex had chosen 5 prisoners to die as examples, including Park Do-yun and Lee Ji-ho. The ceremony would be broadcast across human space as a warning to other colonies. Nari realized this might actually be an opportunity. During the executions, many guards would be focused on security around the ceremony. Other parts of the ship might have reduced surveillance, but they would need to act quickly and decisively. There would be no second chances. That night, as the prisoners tried to sleep in their cramped quarters, Nari lay awake finalizing every detail of her plan. She would need to reach the secondary communication array, bypass the biometric locks, and broadcast the frequency that would disable the Velkin crew and destabilize their power systems. Meanwhile, other prisoners would create diversions to draw attention away from critical areas. Minho would lead what appeared to be a desperate escape attempt, making the guards think they were dealing with a simple prison break rather than a coordinated attack on ship systems. The plan required split-second timing and assumed many things would go perfectly, but it was their only hope. Early the next morning, Velkan soldiers came to collect the condemned prisoners. Park Do-yeon looked calm as they dragged him away, but Nari saw him mouth the words "good luck" in her direction. Lee Ji-ho gave her a small nod, trusting that she would not let their sacrifice be meaningless. As the execution preparations began, Nari started her own preparation. She gathered the equipment she had built from scrap materials, including devices to generate sonic frequencies and bypass electronic locks. Everything fit into a small bag that she could hide under her work clothes. The execution ceremony was scheduled for midday, when the ship's crew rotation would put the fewest guards in the lower levels. Nari positioned herself near a maintenance access point that led toward the communication array. At exactly noon, alarms began sounding throughout the ship, but these were not emergency alerts. They were ceremonial announcements that the executions were beginning. General Thex's voice echoed through the corridors, declaring that the deaths of these humans would serve as a lesson to all who opposed the Velkan Empire. This was the moment Nari had been waiting for. As guards throughout the ship focused their attention on the execution ceremony, she slipped into the maintenance tunnels and began making her way toward the communication array. The journey through the ship's infrastructure was treacherous. She had to crawl through narrow spaces, climb vertical shafts, and navigate around dangerous energy conduits. But her small size was an advantage here. No Velkan could have followed her through these passages. As she climbed toward the upper levels, she could hear Thex's voice continuing his speech about Velkan superiority and human weakness. His words filled her with determination. Soon he would learn what happened when someone underestimated human intelligence and courage. She reached the level where the secondary communication array was located. Through a ventilation grate, she could see the equipment room. It was guarded, but only by 2 soldiers who seemed bored and distracted by the execution broadcast. Nari checked her improvised tools one more time. The sonic generator was crude, but should be capable of producing the frequencies needed to incapacitate Velkans and destabilize their power cores. The biometric spoofer that Cho Yuna had helped her design would hopefully fool the security systems long enough to access the communication array. She took a deep breath and prepared to put her plan into action. In a few minutes, she would either save her fellow prisoners and strike a blow against the Velkan Empire, or she would die trying. Either way, General Thex would finally understand that the small human engineer he had dismissed as insignificant was about to change the course of the war. The real battle was about to begin. The execution chamber was filled with Velkan officers and crew members, all gathered to witness General Thex demonstrate human weakness to the galaxy. Large screens showed the ceremony being broadcast to human colonies across space, intended to crush any thoughts of resistance. Park Do-yeon stood with dignity on the execution platform, his hands bound but his head held high. Beside him, Lee Ji-ho and 3 other prisoners faced their deaths with quiet courage. Thex paced before them like a predator savoring the moment before the kill. "Let this be a lesson to all humans," Thex declared to the cameras. "Your species exists only because we allow it. Resistance is futile. Rebellion is death." But as he raised his plasma weapon to begin the executions, alerts began flashing on the command screens around the chamber. A technician approached hesitantly. "General, we are detecting unusual energy readings in the lower decks," the Velkan reported nervously. Thex barely glanced at the displays. "Handle it after the ceremony. Nothing is more important than this demonstration." He did not know that 3 levels below, Nari had already begun her attack. The 2 guards outside the communication array room suddenly staggered, clutching their ears in agony. A high-pitched whine filled the air, precisely tuned to the frequency that caused maximum pain to Velkan hearing organs. They collapsed within seconds, their sensitive ears bleeding from the sonic assault. Nari emerged from the ventilation shaft, her improvised sonic generator still humming with deadly frequency. She quickly dragged the unconscious guards away from the door and activated Cho Yuna's biometric spoofer. The device worked perfectly. The security system accepted the false Velkan DNA signature and unlocked the communication array room. Nari slipped inside and began connecting her equipment to the ship's main communication network. Meanwhile, Seo Minho led his diversionary attack in the prison sectors. 20 strong prisoners overwhelmed their guards and began fighting their way toward what appeared to be an escape route. Alarms blared as security forces rushed to contain what they thought was a simple breakout attempt. The diversion worked exactly as planned. Guards throughout the ship responded to the prison break, leaving other areas lightly defended. No one suspected that the real attack was happening in the communication center. Nari's fingers flew over the alien controls as she accessed the ship's network. Her weeks of study paid off as she navigated through Velkan security protocols. The system was complex but logical, and her engineering mind could follow the patterns. She found what she was looking for: the ship's main communication array. Through this system, she could broadcast to every part of the massive vessel. More importantly, she could access the frequency controls for the quantum power cores. But as she began uploading her sonic attack program, more alerts appeared on the command screens in the execution chamber. This time the readings were impossible to ignore. "General," the technician called urgently. "The energy disturbances are spreading. We are losing contact with several sections." Thex snarled in frustration. The ceremony was supposed to be perfect, but these technical problems were ruining the broadcast. "Send security teams to investigate. Find the source of these malfunctions." He turned back to the prisoners, raising his weapon again. But before he could fire, the lights in the execution chamber flickered. A low harmonic tone began emanating from the ship's communication system. The effect on the Velkan crew was immediate. Officers and guards throughout the chamber staggered, pressing their hands to their ears as pain shot through their sensitive hearing organs. The frequency was precisely tuned to cause maximum discomfort without immediately incapacitating them. Thex himself felt the assault on his ears, but his military training helped him fight through the pain. His yellow eyes blazed with sudden understanding as he looked at the technical displays, showing communication system intrusion. "The human prisoners," he growled. "They are behind this." He abandoned the execution and stormed toward the communication center, his elite guards following despite their obvious discomfort from the sonic attack. Behind them, the human prisoners on the execution platform used the confusion to break free from their restraints. Nari saw the security alerts indicating that Thex was coming for her. She had perhaps 2 minutes before he arrived. Her hands moved frantically over the controls as she prepared the final phase of her attack. The harmonic frequency she had been broadcasting was just the beginning. Now she activated the real weapon, a resonance cascade that would destabilize every quantum power core in the Velkan fleet. The effect began immediately. Throughout the massive dreadnought, power fluctuations started cascading through the ship's systems. Emergency lights flickered as backup systems struggled to compensate. In the engineering sections, Velkan technicians watched in horror as their readings showed impossible energy spikes. Jung In-ho, still working in the engineering areas, saw the chaos beginning around him. Velkan engineers were running between control stations, trying desperately to understand what was happening to their perfect technology. "The cores are destabilizing," one alien shouted to another. The harmonic resonance is creating feedback loops throughout the entire power grid. But they could not stop what Nari had started. The cascade effect was already spreading to other ships in the fleet. As each vessel's power systems began failing, their communication arrays went offline, preventing any coordinated response. Thex reached the communication center just as the power in his own ship began to fail. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as he burst through the door, his plasma weapon ready to kill the saboteur. He found Nari standing calmly at the control console, her work nearly complete. For a moment, they stared at each other across the room, the massive alien warrior and the small human engineer who had brought his fleet to its knees. "You!" Thex snarled, his voice filled with disbelief and rage. "The insignificant little creature from the mining station. How is this possible?" Nari looked up at him without fear. Her mission was almost finished. The cascade effect was spreading through the fleet, and nothing could stop it now. "You made a mistake, General," she said quietly. "You judged me by my appearance instead of my capabilities. You saw weakness where there was strength. You dismissed intelligence because it came in a small package." Thex raised his weapon, fury burning in his yellow eyes. "I am General Thex Valorian, conqueror of 12 worlds. I will not be defeated by human vermin." "You already have been," Nari replied. "Your own arrogance was your downfall. You never considered that humans might be more dangerous than you thought." Around them, the ship shuddered as more power systems failed. The lights went out completely, leaving only the glow from emergency systems. Through the ship's hull, they could hear the sounds of other vessels in the fleet suffering similar failures. Thex fired his weapon, but the energy bolt went wide as another power surge rocked the ship, In the darkness, he heard running footsteps as human prisoners began moving through the corridors. The sonic frequency had incapacitated most of his crew, and the power failures had disabled security systems throughout the fleet. His perfect, invincible armada was dying around him, brought down by a small human engineer he had dismissed as worthless. For the first time in his military career, General Thex Valorian knew the taste of defeat, and it was bitter beyond anything he had ever imagined. The command center of the Dominion's fist was in chaos. Emergency lights cast red shadows across the walls as Velkan officers struggled to understand how their mighty fleet was being destroyed from within. Sparks flew from overloaded control panels, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. General Thex stood in the flickering darkness, his plasma weapon trained on Nari. But his hand shook with rage and disbelief as he watched his perfect military machine falling apart around him. "Stop this immediately," he commanded, his deep voice echoing through the damaged communication center. "Reverse what you have done, or I will kill you slowly." Nari remained calm despite the weapon pointed at her. She could feel the ship's power systems continuing to fail, exactly as she had planned. The harmonic cascade was spreading through the entire fleet, and nothing could stop it now. "I cannot reverse it," she said simply. "The cascade effect is self-sustaining. Your quantum cores will continue destabilizing until they shut down completely." Through the ship's hull, they could hear explosions from other vessels in the fleet. Emergency broadcasts crackled over the communication systems as ship after ship reported total power failure. The pride of the Velkan Empire was being reduced to drifting metal in space. Thex's yellow eyes blazed with fury. Everything he had built, every victory he had won was being undone by this insignificant human female. His species had ruled through superior technology and military might for generations, yet one small engineer was destroying it all. "How?" he demanded. "How did you learn our systems? How did you find our weaknesses?" "I watched and listened," Nari replied. "While you laughed at human intelligence, I was studying your technology. While you dismissed us as primitive, I was finding flaws in your designs. You taught me everything I needed to know." The general's grip tightened on his weapon. "Impossible. Our technology is centuries ahead of yours. Our quantum cores are perfect, flawless." "Nothing is perfect," Nari said. "Every system has weaknesses. Your cores maintain stability through harmonic resonance, but that same resonance can be turned against them. Your hearing evolved for hunting, but that makes you vulnerable to sonic attacks. Your arrogance made you blind to threats you considered beneath you." Suddenly, the door to the communication center burst open. Seo Minho rushed in, followed by several other human prisoners who had escaped during the chaos. They had fought their way through corridors filled with incapacitated Velkan guards to reach this critical location. "Nari," Minho called out. "Are you all right?" Thex spun toward the new arrivals, his weapon swinging between them and Nari. "Stay back, or she dies." But as he turned, more systems throughout the ship failed. The artificial gravity fluctuated, causing everyone to stumble. Life support systems began shutting down as the power cascade reached critical infrastructure. "Your ship is dying, General," Nari said. "Your fleet is defeated. Surrender now and perhaps we can save some of your crew." "Never," Thex roared. "I would rather see this ship destroyed than surrender to human vermin." He aimed his weapon at Nari's heart, his finger tightening on the trigger. But Minho threw himself forward, tackling the massive alien around the waist. The two combatants crashed into a control console, sending sparks flying. Thex was larger and stronger, but Minho had military training and desperation on his side. They fought viciously in the cramped space as the ship continued falling apart around them. Other prisoners joined the battle, overwhelming the general's remaining guards. During the struggle, Thex's weapon discharged. The plasma bolt streaked across the room toward Nari, who was still working at the communication console. Minho saw the shot coming and threw himself in front of her, taking the energy blast in his chest. The former Earth Defense Force captain collapsed to the deck, his body smoking from the terrible wound. With his dying breath, he looked at Nari and whispered, "Finish it." Nari felt tears streaming down her face, but her hands never stopped moving over the controls. She activated the final sequence of her program, sending shutdown commands to every remaining system in the Velkan fleet. The effect was immediate and devastating. Ship after ship went dark as their power cores finally collapsed completely. The massive dreadnoughts that had terrorized human space for years became lifeless hulks drifting in the void. Thex, pinned under several prisoners, watched his fleet die on the remaining display screens. His life's work, his legacy of conquest, reduced to nothing by a human engineer he had thought too insignificant to notice. "This cannot be happening," he muttered, his voice broken. "The Velkan Empire is supreme. Humans are weak, primitive, worthless." "We are what you made us," Nari said, turning to face him. "You forced us to become stronger, smarter, more resourceful. You taught us that we could not rely on anyone else for protection, so we learned to protect ourselves." The ship's emergency communication system crackled to life. A new voice filled the air, speaking in human language. "This is Admiral Song Kyung-ho of the Earth Defense Force. We are responding to your distress signal. Falcon vessels, you are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Through the viewports, they could see the approaching lights of human warships. The Earth Defense Force had detected the Velkan fleet's distress signals and responded with overwhelming force. But instead of finding a victorious alien armada, they discovered disabled vessels and rescued prisoners. Thex stared in shock. "Impossible. Your fleet was destroyed years ago. We crushed your military. You destroyed our old fleet," Nari explained. "But we built a new one, using technology we learned from studying your ships. Every defeat taught us something. Every loss made us stronger." The general's worldview was crumbling around him. Everything he believed about Velkan superiority and human weakness had been proven wrong. A single small engineer had accomplished what entire human fleets could not: the complete defeat of his forces. As human marines boarded the disabled Velkan ships, Thex found himself in chains for the first time in his life. The mighty conqueror had become a prisoner, defeated by the very beings he had dismissed as worthless. Nari stood over him, no longer the frightened captive from the mining station. She had become something new, a symbol of human ingenuity and determination that no alien empire could crush. "You scoffed at me," she said quietly. "You laughed at human intelligence and dismissed our potential. But we never forgot that lesson. We will never again allow ourselves to be caught unprepared." Around them, the rescued human prisoners began cheering as Earth Defense Force medics treated their injuries, and Earth Defense Force engineers assessed the captured Velkan technology. The tables had turned completely. General Thex Valorian, conqueror of 12 worlds, had finally met his match in a small human engineer named Kim Nari, and the galaxy would never be the same. The medical bay of the Earth Defense Force flagship was filled with rescued prisoners receiving treatment. Kim Nari sat on an examination table, her small frame wrapped in a clean medical gown. But her mind was still processing everything that had happened. Admiral Song Kyung-ho entered the bay, his weathered face showing a mixture of amazement and respect. He had commanded human fleets for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like what this young engineer had accomplished. "Miss Kim," he said, approaching her bed, "I need to understand exactly how you defeated an entire Velkan war fleet. Our tactical analysts are calling it impossible." Nari looked up at the Admiral, still feeling the weight of Seo Minho's sacrifice. "I studied their technology, Admiral. Every system has weaknesses if you know where to look." Around them, other survivors were being reunited with medical teams. Park Do-hyun had survived the execution chamber chaos and was being treated for minor injuries. Cho Yuna was helping doctors understand Velkan biology to better treat prisoners who had been exposed to alien environments. "But how did you learn about Velkan quantum cores?" Song asked. "Our best scientists have been trying to understand their power systems for years. They put me in waste processing," Nari explained. "They thought it was punishment, but it gave me access to every system on the ship. I could study their technology while they ignored me completely." The Admiral shook his head in wonder. "And the harmonic frequency attack? I noticed that Velkans have very sensitive hearing. Their ears evolved for hunting, which made them vulnerable to specific sound frequencies. The same frequencies that hurt them also destabilized their power cores." Through the medical bay windows, they could see the captured Velkan fleet. Dozens of massive warships hung dead in space, their crews either unconscious from the sonic attack or surrender to human forces. It was the largest military victory in human history. "The technology we're recovering from these ships will change everything," Song said. "Our engineers estimate it will advance human science by 50 years. We'll be able to build defenses that no alien empire can penetrate." But Nari was thinking about more than just technology. "Admiral, we need to make sure this never happens again. Other species need to understand that humans are not easy prey. What do you suggest?" We should share this story. Let every alien civilization know what happened here. Show them that underestimating humanity is a fatal mistake. Song nodded approvingly. I think that can be arranged. In another part of the medical bay, General Thex Valorian sat in a secure cell, his massive frame hunched in defeat. For the first time in his military career, he wore restraints instead of commanding others. Human guards watched him carefully, but he showed no signs of resistance. Dr. Cho Yuna approached his cell, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear of the alien commander. Through the translator, she asked, "General, do you understand what happened to your fleet?" Thex looked up with hollow eyes. "A small human female destroyed everything I built. Everything my species believed about our superiority. Why did you dismiss her so completely?" Yuna asked. The general was quiet for a long moment. In Velkan culture, physical size equals strength. Strength equals value. I saw a tiny human and assumed she was worthless. I never considered that intelligence could be more powerful than muscle. Will you share this lesson with your people? Thex nodded slowly. If they will listen, many will not want to believe that humans defeated us through cleverness rather than superior weapons. Meanwhile, human engineers were swarming over the captured Velkan ships, studying every system and component. What they found amazed them. The alien technology was indeed advanced, but it was also rigid and inflexible. The Velkans had built their systems to be powerful, but had never considered that someone might turn those systems against them. Look at this power distribution network, said one engineer to his colleague. It's incredibly efficient, but there are no safeguards against the kind of harmonic attack Miss Kim used. They never imagined anyone would try such a thing. Their whole military doctrine is based on overwhelming force, replied the other engineer. They never prepared for unconventional tactics. The captured technology was immediately sent to human research facilities across the galaxy. Within months, new defensive systems were being installed on every human world. The quantum resonance principles that Nari had discovered led to revolutionary advances in power generation and weapons technology. But perhaps more importantly, the story of the battle spread throughout known space. Other alien species learned about the small human engineer who had defeated the mighty Velkan Empire through intelligence and determination rather than superior firepower. Some species reacted with fear, realizing that humans were far more dangerous than they had assumed. Others reacted with respect, understanding that humanity deserved to be treated as equals rather than primitives. The Velkan Empire itself was fundamentally changed by the defeat. Many worlds that had been conquered by the reptilian aliens declared independence, inspired by the human victory. The Empire's military doctrine was completely restructured as they realized that brute force alone was no longer sufficient in a galaxy where smaller species might possess devastating cleverness. A year later, Nari stood in the main laboratory of the newly constructed Earth Defense Research Institute. The facility had been built using recovered Velkan technology, but it was designed according to human principles of flexibility and adaptability. She was now director of xenotechnology research, leading teams of scientists who studied alien systems for both defensive and peaceful purposes. Her small office overlooked the shipyards where new human vessels were being constructed, using hybrid human-Velkan designs. Admiral Song visited her regularly to discuss new developments and potential threats. We've received reports of another alien empire in the Outer Rim, he informed her during one visit. The Korthan hegemony. They're reportedly even more aggressive than the Velkans. Nari smiled grimly. Then they'll learn the same lesson the Velkans did. Humanity is not the same species that was helpless 5 years ago. Are you ready for another challenge? Song asked. I'm an engineer, Admiral. Engineers solve problems. If the Korthans become a problem, then we'll solve them too. Through her office window, she could see the memorial to Seo Minho and the other humans who had died during the Velkan occupation. Their sacrifice had not been forgotten, and their memory drove humanity to become stronger and more prepared for future challenges. On her desk sat a simple inscription, "Never underestimate the power of human ingenuity." It had become the unofficial motto of the Earth Defense Forces, reminding everyone that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or firepower, but the ability to think creatively and adapt to any situation. The small engineer who had once been dismissed as insignificant had become a symbol of human potential. Her victory over General Thex had proven that in a galaxy full of physically superior species, intelligence and determination could triumph over any challenge. And as new threats emerged from the depths of space, humanity was ready to meet them with the same spirit that had defeated the Velkan Empire. Never surrender, never stop learning, and never let anyone underestimate what humans could accomplish when their backs were against the wall. The age of human vulnerability was over. The age of human strength had begun. The battle for New Sol lasted only 3 hours, but it changed the galaxy forever. The Korthan advance fleet arrived expecting to find a defenseless human colony, ripe for conquest. Instead, they encountered the most sophisticated trap in military history. Kim Nari watched the battle from the command center of the Earth Defense Force flagship, her eyes fixed on tactical displays showing the engagement. The Korthan ships were indeed faster and more heavily armed than anything humanity had faced before. But speed and firepower meant nothing when you flew directly into a carefully prepared ambush. Korthan fleet is entering the asteroid field, reported Commander Park Jisoo from the sensor station. They're maintaining attack formation just as predicted. The New Sol system had been chosen as the battleground because of its dense asteroid belt. Over the past year, human engineers had secretly installed thousands of harmonic resonance generators throughout the rocky debris. When activated simultaneously, they would create a frequency web that no Korthan ship could escape. "Are they taking the bait?" asked Admiral Song, standing beside Nari at the command console. "Perfectly," Nari replied, watching the alien ships move deeper into the trap. "They see our defensive fleet retreating and think we're afraid. Their arrogance is making them predictable." The Korthan commander, Admiral Thraxon, was indeed feeling confident. His dark gray skin rippled with pleasure as he watched the human ships fleeing before his superior force. Like most members of his species, he was tall and lean, with 4 arms that allowed him to operate multiple weapon systems simultaneously. "Pathetic humans," he said to his bridge crew. "Their reputation was greatly exaggerated. Look how they run from our might." But as his fleet moved deeper into the asteroid field, pursuing what they thought were retreating human vessels, the trap was sprung. Thousands of hidden generators activated at once, filling space with a complex harmonic frequency pattern. The effect on Korthan ships was immediate and devastating. Their quantum drives, which relied on precise energy harmonics to achieve faster-than-light speeds, began experiencing massive interference. Engine systems shut down as the carefully tuned frequencies disrupted their power cores. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out in alarm, "we're losing engine power across the fleet. All ships report drive failure." Thraxon stared at his displays in disbelief. "Impossible. Our technology is superior to anything these primitives possess. How are they affecting our engines?" The answer came as human ships emerged from hiding places throughout the asteroid field. But these were not the vessels the Korthans had been chasing. Those had been unmanned decoys, designed to lure the enemy into position. The real human fleet consisted of ships built using hybrid technology that combined the best of human engineering with recovered, Velkan and now adapted Korthan innovations. "This is Admiral Song Kyung-ho of the Earth Defense Force," came a transmission on all frequencies. "Korthan vessels, you are surrounded and your engines are disabled. Surrender immediately, or face the consequences of underestimating humanity." From her position on the flagship, Nari activated the secondary phase of her plan. Throughout the asteroid field, hidden weapons platforms powered up, their energy signatures masked until this moment by the same harmonic interference affecting the Korthan drives. "Admiral Thraxon," Nari's voice joined the communication channel. "I am Director Kim Nari, the engineer who designed this trap. You made the same mistake your predecessors made. You assumed human weakness based on outdated information." The Korthan commander's 4 eyes widened as he recognized the name. Even in the distant regions where his empire originated, stories had begun to spread about the small human female who had single-handedly defeated the Velkan fleet. "You," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of respect and fear. "The engineer of destruction." "I prefer to think of myself as a problem solver," Nari replied. "And you, Admiral, have become a problem that needs solving." The Korthan fleet was completely helpless, their ships drifting powerless in the asteroid field, while human vessels surrounded them. But unlike the Velkans, who had fought to the end, Admiral Thraxon proved to be more pragmatic. "I surrender," he announced to his fleet. All ships stand down. We yield to human forces. The battle was over before it had truly begun. Within hours, the most feared military force in the Outer Rim had been captured intact, their advanced technology and tactical knowledge now available for human study. In the aftermath of the victory, representatives from dozens of alien species arrived at New Sol to witness the impossible. The humans had not merely defeated another superior enemy. They had done so without firing a single shot or losing a single ship. How? Asked Ambassador Veltar of the Antaran Federation as he toured the captured Korthan flagship. Their technology was centuries ahead of ours. How did you turn their own systems against them? Nari led the group of alien dignitaries through the disabled vessel, pointing out the engineering modifications that had made the trap possible. Every advanced system has vulnerabilities. The more complex the technology, the more ways it can be disrupted. But how did you know about Korthan quantum drives? Pressed General Zixoth. They were completely unknown in this region of space. We captured intact examples during their first raids on outer colonies, Nari explained. While they were celebrating easy victories, our salvage teams were studying their wrecked ships. Every attack taught us something new about their capabilities. The tour continued through the ship's engineering sections, where human technicians were already beginning to reverse engineer Korthan technology. But they were doing so carefully with full understanding of the systems they were studying, rather than blindly copying alien designs. This is remarkable, commented Dr. Horthak, a scientist from the Ursine Confederation. You've integrated technologies from 3 different species into a cohesive whole. That's what humans do, said Commander Park Jisu, who had joined the tour. We adapt, we learn, we take the best ideas from everywhere and make them work together. Later that evening, Nari stood in her temporary office aboard the New Sol orbital station, writing her report on the battle. Through her window, she could see the captured Korthan ships being moved to secure facilities where their technology would be studied and adapted for human use. Admiral Song entered her office, carrying 2 cups of coffee. The Galactic Council wants to hold a formal ceremony honoring your victory, he said, offering her one of the cups. That's not necessary, Nari replied, taking the coffee gratefully. I was just doing my job. Your job seems to involve revolutionizing galactic politics, Song observed with a smile. 3 different alien empires have now learned not to underestimate humanity. Word is spreading to every corner of known space. Good, Nari said firmly. Maybe the next potential aggressors will think twice before attacking human colonies. And if they don't? Nari sipped her coffee and looked out at the stars. Then they'll learn the same lesson the others did. Humans don't give up. We don't stop learning. And we never forget that our greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. What is our greatest strength? Song asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Our ability to see possibilities where others see only problems, Nari replied. Every challenge makes us stronger. Every defeat teaches us something new. Every enemy that underestimates us gives us another opportunity to prove them wrong. A communication alert sounded, indicating an incoming message from Earth. Song activated the display, revealing the face of President Lee Min-soo. Director Kim, Admiral Song, the president said with obvious pride. I'm calling to congratulate you on another impossible victory. The entire Human Federation is celebrating. Thank you, Mr. President, Nari replied, but this is just the beginning. The technology we've captured will help us prepare for future challenges. Speaking of which, the president continued, we've received some interesting intelligence from our new Korthan prisoners. It seems there are even more advanced civilizations in the galactic core, species that make the Korthans look primitive by comparison. Nari smiled. Then I guess we'll have more problems to solve. After the communication ended, Song looked at his chief engineer with amazement. Doesn't anything worry you anymore? Of course it does, Nari admitted. But worry is just another problem to solve. And I've gotten very good at solving problems. She turned back to her report, documenting every detail of the battle for future reference. Somewhere in the galaxy, other potential enemies were probably planning their own attacks on human space. When they came, they would find humanity ready. The small engineer who had once been dismissed as insignificant had become the most feared military strategist in known space. Not because of her weapons or her armies, but because of her ability to turn any enemy's strength into their weakness. The age of alien empires underestimating humanity was ending. The age of humanity as a major galactic power had begun, and Kim Nari would be ready for whatever challenges came next, armed with the most dangerous weapon in the universe: human ingenuity.